If you're interested in one of these, let me know. I got the
Of course, I want to hear that from everybody.
We should do that.
Also, Stoll requested, that Georgia Betty Stoll requested a lot of things from me before they passed that. And one of them was staggered deeds. Remember these? So I got them up there for my table. And I got a few of these too they left to me. I don't know if you remember this chart. When we were in school, it talked about all the political and economic systems and how they work out. And I got a bunch of these ones up there. And I guess we're finally, after all these decades, starting to experience all that inflation and predictions. So hopefully not too bad. So that, also I'd like to maybe pass the board to Jim, because I know you all had a lot of questions about what happened to the ships after they were sold, and Jim knows that way better than any of us.
I don't know what anybody might want to know, but I'd be happy to answer questions. I'll hang out as long as forever. But actually, when I signed up for the thing, I was expecting a bunch of teenagers. It's kind of like teenagers around here anyway. At least the teenagers at heart, you know, for that matter. And I think if you ever lost very much of that, then feel a lot of the luster of life that might go along with it. And, you know, I am really clear, though, from chatting with all of you, and it's emotional for me, you know, to be here in this group, and, you know, talking with all of you. And, you know, we really did something really quite extraordinary, you know, together. I learned a lot of lessons, you know, kind of along that path. That, some were just exciting and fun and energizing, and other parts were difficult. And the lessons that I learned, you know, were different than the lessons you learned. But we all are learning all the time. I think, when I was thinking back, you know, the core lesson that I got from the Flint School, that I think made the most difference with the fact that we're still out there doing a lot of kids and working with a lot of teenagers like you guys all around. And the core lesson was really that the entire group that you're ever in and interacting with is going to judge you by how you treat the least perceived person in that group. Because that actually tells them who you are. And so one of the core things that we do in all of our programs, we spend a lot of staff training going over how to, you know, support that squeaky kid, that squeaky wheel that needs the grease, because he's the one that needs the grease. Because if you're not there for everybody uniformly, and the Flint School didn't do a great job of that, but if you're there for everybody, you will build a cohesive team and a cohesive group that can, you know, really do something quite remarkable. So the way that we approach it is very much that way. But, you know, oh, here we have music. You know, but it was a different era. You know, we didn't wear life jackets, right? Right. We didn't. I mean, no race boats didn't even wear PFDs on deck in those days. We didn't have a harness to go in the rigging. Right. We didn't like even tie ourselves in to go out on the bowsprit. We were flipping lucky. We're good. Oh, the other school ships didn't either. You know, nobody did back in the day because it was like one hand for yourself and one for the ship. You know. And it harkens back to like what Admiral Wechsler said for the Sail Training Association meeting. He said, we must not deny our youth their God-given right to dare. And I think that works well for the Navy. But, you know, there's a liability for that in the commercial world, which we would sort of more akin to. And today it would be unconscionable, you know, to like live that way and work. When we don't, on our ships that sail around the world, there is nobody even puts a foot on deck until they've got their PFD and their inflatable, you know, auto-inflatable collar on just the right way. And they're snapped in if it's, you know, if it's that kind of condition at night or something like that.
It's very similar for us.
Yeah. Yeah, same. You survive.
We had our best friend,
We'll all
right?
survive.
We all had our best friend,
Yeah.
right?
Indeed. But then there's the, I mean, that's the physical side of it. But then you have sort of the inner self side of it, the personal side of it. And, you know, that's important, you know. It's another really key thing that, you know, needs to be there for everybody in an environment. I mean, we felt it together at some points, but there were aspects of the Flint School that were, you know, if you weren't quad or you weren't this or you weren't that, you know, you weren't up to that level. I mean, everybody's really on the same measure. I think that's where the least perceived person, you know, comes in. And you need to be there for everybody because everybody's different. So now in our staff training or whatever, we even had a meeting in the office like last month, like, okay, we now have, how are we going to deal with these rising tide of non-binary youth that are coming into our program? We're trying to play both sides of the line, like which bathroom do we let them use and which cabin do they sleep in and all of this, because it's important to support people from every direction they've taken for themselves, you know. And it's not something you do reluctantly. You do it because it's important, and it's important for them. And that is what makes the difference. And so we were in that era where it was like shape up or shape out, but now we're in a completely different, you know, paradigm here in our world today. And we're responding to it in that way. Because the tide rises and the tide falls. You know? So tide comes in, tide comes out. I'm like 76 by now in the next month. And yet I'm probably the only one here that can still, like, next week if I want to, just hop on board with a bunch of young people who are out there building their own dreams. And it was a real pleasure for me to have participated and been able to be here in this event. I mean, truly emotionally uplifting to have the opportunity to just interact with you guys again in a very wonderful way. And I know you're just a bunch of teenagers out there that live your own life and follow your own dreams and still make it happen. So thanks for having me.
I want to say, I was only at Flint School 1 year, but we also appreciate you coming, because it was like a few weeks ago, I think we knew you were going to be here, and it made all the difference in the whole group. Okay? We really thank you.
That's special.
Okay. Thank you.
Also, who here knows Mike Dodge? Remember him? Well, Mike Dodge was quite the sailor. He left Flint School and was a first mate on some really famous ships. And he called me earlier today, and he wanted me to acknowledge Jim as being one of the top 20 sailors alive. And that we were really privileged to sail with him.
Well, thanks for that. Keep it on.
There's a long list of all these other famous sailors he hung out with, and he said he was an amazing captain.
I was a witness, I heard the whole conversation. I'm his sister.
Okay.
It was nice, very nice person.
And Mike Dodge says hi to everybody, and he says he still has your grave.
I don't still have your grade.
So if the Flint School was going today, would everyone walk on board and have to have a PFD hold on?
If the boat's moving, yes.
Both.
Yes. And if the boat's moving in, there were only times, like, the only time we don't have somebody put on the word, like, oh, there, city, in those situations. But if the boat is moving, you're wearing a PFD that is auto-inflatable, and they even go off when they shouldn't sometimes. A little water comes in. You explode, but yeah, you're always in it. And you're clipped on, especially at night or with, the same harness as well. But not in the islands. In the islands, they just wear standard PFDs. But that's on our Action Quest program, where we have about 700 kids every summer, including this summer.
Are we going to be able to take reservations for the programs?
You ready? Yeah, we're full. Yeah.
No, I'm sure everybody knows that, right?
Yeah, no, that's the funny thing was, if they could get to the boat, they wouldn't be there. Yeah, I thought about that one. Yeah, we did also. But you guys, we should do that. I still like on the boats, but the program is directed by a guy named Mike Deegan. He's just magical. He's a British guy. He does everything 10 times better than I could have ever done it. And he's
I saw him in actions out there, and I stopped by to that.
amazing guy.
And what about the college program?
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. It's full. It's in Palau. We're in Palau. We're in the west coast of Italy. That boat's coming back across. Gonna sail out of the Med pretty soon and stuff.
Well, I remember there a few years ago, someone you looked at the Mary Poppins house, and then you sold that, you got another place.
Yeah,
a couple roads over, right?
That's right, yeah.
I was like, where is it? It disappeared.
Yeah.
And then I called, and he said, oh, no, it's over here. I was trying to get some information from some people that were interested in it. It's really good to see. I didn't know your new crew, but they're wonderful people. And just watching the time I was in BVI's, and I pulled in there. I watched them while they were all training, getting ready for all the students, the summer campers to come. I mean, it was
They
amazing.
spend 5 days
Amazing
there.
program for the staff and everybody.
5 days of the staff training, about 2 are practical stuff. The other 3 are about support and how to work with people, how to have everybody feel supported from the Corps. And they do everything from Dow leadership right on through.
My son, they sent on scholarship down to Thailand, or Tahiti.
Yeah.
He got to go on a boat with 2 guys, just he and another guy, and 5 girls. And the other guy was ugly. So my son made out like a bandit, and he's currently a boat builder and a fisherman in Stewart, Florida. He's loved so much by the people that used to own American Custom Yachts that the owner's son would take them on their own boat to go fishing and say, sorry, Billy won't be here for the next 2 weeks. We're going to borrow him for a while. And he'd get to go down and fish and come back and play. And he's still there 16 years later. And now another guy has bought the boat yard. And we're going to build some different custom boats there. But it was all from this man's experience, our experience of him. Have you ever heard of a high school reunion 47 years later where people actually went? Look at this.
And they didn't look like they're on oxygen?
I don't know it's going to be on TeVega. They inspected our stuff at teQuest in Copenhagen. The first thing they did, said, you're getting a haircut. Hey, open up that duffel bag. We're going to search that thing. You have any drugs? You can tell us now. We'll throw them aboard. I said, I don't have any drugs. Everybody's going to get searched. Oh my God, we're going to a prison school. Now we transit cities. And you know what? It was the most wonderful thing. I was thinking of the day that we met up with those shrimp boats down there by Salute Island, Devil's Island. And we took on so much shrimp. We had a graduation in Guadalupe, I think in '76, before Tall Ships Race. And we peeled and cleaned 5,000 shrimp.
Huge. Come on. They were massive.
Oh, massive.
You didn't tell the whole story.
Okay.
Well, the whole story was starting at 2:30 in the morning.
Right.
Do you remember?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
When we got there?
No, I mean, at 2:30 in the morning, here comes this shrimp boat up behind us while we were at anchor.
And somehow-
crashed right into the back of the boat.
Yeah.
Broke the gallows, broke all that stuff, and then he drives around, and then he crashes into the side of the boat, and breaks the cap rail, lifts the David out, crashes into the launch. And what did he do? You know, he's looking for a girlfriend because he'd seen girls on board. So he's driving, he said, no,
That's a boat with no sex, right?
and he drives the boat right into us like two times. And then finally we got him to go over an anchor, I don't know how, and went over the next morning. But they who is it?
That's David Elders.
David Elders. Of all people. That's a rumor. There's no evidence. Yeah.
So then they offer us this shrimp?
What you don't know about Sam, by the way, is his dad was one of the most famous ocean racers in the world, Sam Griffith. And his dad was, a friend of Dick Bertram, because Dick Bertram had been my mentor, as a lot of you know. And Dick was sailing on Vim in 1956, America's Cup boat off Newport. And out comes a boat designed by Ray Hunt, just cutting through all the chop. It was a deep V. And that was the first of the deep Vs, because before then all the race boats were flat bottom. And that's what his dad was racing, flat bottom boats all over the place. And he was the fastest guy in the water in the world. And so that was Sam's dad. And then Dick went down, commissioned Ray Hunt to build the first Bertram, which was called Moppy. He used it as a service boat there at Bertram Yachts. And then he got, Sam's dad over there, and he said, well, if it was any deeper, you're going to need a centerboard in the thing. It'll never go fast. And then Dick convinced him to rig it up as a race boat, and they beat every boat by 5 hours.
8 hours, the next boat came.
Yeah.
It did it in 8 hours, finally to Nassau.
Yeah.
And the next boat came in 5 or 8 hours.
And then they won every major ocean race in the world, back to back.
That's what started the company. January 1961.
That's
And this is the 60th anniversary of Bertram Yachts. They're still alive. It's a new company owned by an Italian up in Tampa, and they're doing really well. Oh, look at that. Oh my God, who took these pictures?
That's all.
That's
Canadian
the
navigators. Yeah. We know who that is. Yeah.
So Jim, you mentioned something once to me, I asked you about your connection to the students and stuff, and you mentioned that you spent more time with us than you did any of your other students or something.
Yeah, I think so.
Except your staff.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, there was also, a student difference between like TeVega crew and Quest crew.
Huge difference. We were envious.
Yeah. Well,
Us on TeQuest.
we were just
Well, also on TeVega, there was Kai Dellinger was doing his galley boasting. That was real food. I sucker knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the food was definitely better on
TeQuest,
TeQuest.
food was not the same.
Are you using a lot of it's cooked for me?
Every time we went to see Candy got ill, and we had what, peanut butter sandwiches or something? Like
Beautiful girl. Yeah.
So by the way,
So now, is she still a diva, or what's happened?
No, it's Diva still. Yeah, it's still owned by TeVega.
if you, last time I looked, about a year ago, you could see TeVega, or Diva as she's called now. She's just south of La Spezia on a little peninsula at a marina. You can see her on the Google Earth.
Yeah, it's in the Cinque Terre area, just on the backside of the Cinque Terre. And it's just around the corner from Porto Venere, which is the point that comes down.
Now, I saw that Diva was up for sale 2 or 3 years ago.
It's still for sale.
Yeah, and it's been he charters it out too, I think.
I don't think so. It's private, you need
Oh,
to charge.
look at that. I remember that. Harry Schultz, right? Yeah.
Very simple.
There's the help one.
You can't say
That one's
she's
even better.
for sale and then not say what she's for sale for.
So,
So, I mean, I'm not in the market, but I am curious.
That boat, I think that they were trying to get like 10 million or something. Yeah. The other boat, I mean, today, that would be a pretty good price to get for that boat. Yeah.
it's got a historical premium. They're both 91 years old now. And actually, when I was in Tulane, when I was in college, I found the original ad in Yachty magazine announcing these two wonderful new yachts that had just been built and launched. And they're both on this, they both came out on the same page.
They're on the same page.
They're on the same
basically.
page right there. You can see the lot. I got your copies if you want to get them. Maybe you close to where they are. Anything on the floor is sitting out there is free. Directions.
Yeah, thank you for such a wonderful website, collecting all this, sharing it with everybody.
Who else wants to share something?
And then, like I said, and also Aquarius, can you explain the thing about Aquarius?
Aquarius, if you didn't know, was the guy that bought the Aquarius from when he came on board in Copenhagen. There.
Yeah, so you all know that teQuest was basically gutted. You can explain it.
So yeah, basically the owner that bought it and kept it for 20 years he got on board with a broker from England and Halsey Marine, and they wanted to, make it into a yacht. And I was listening to the broker say, we can do this, and make this boat back into a yacht. And I took the guy aside and I said, don't listen to the broker. I said, I'd like to sell the boat, but it will never be a yacht again unless you strip the hull off, you strip everything out, you cut everything.
Frames, right?
Yeah, you're gonna have nothing but frames. You might as well build a new boat, And of course, Sam got involved in the whole thing.
Oh, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
And while we were redoing this, we didn't know the name of the owner. It was kept completely secret.
Yeah, just.
Sid Pike used to come around, and I was always, everywhere we went, I got postcards, and I was writing, just like when I was in the Flint School, to show everybody where I was. And Sid was running around, oh, Sammy, super Schreiber. And every time he'd say that, this guy's ears would perk up like, what's going on? And we didn't find out until much later.
This was a broker, he was a banker from Dresdner Bank, and he ran the currency department. He also, when the United States had their first gold auction, he bought like 92% of the auction for Dresdner Bank at $33 an ounce. And so that was a major coup, and he also bought some for himself at the same time. So he had plenty of bucks, and he said, he took Elsa aside and said, "Is that true? Was Jim saying you never make it a yacht again?" And she said, "Yeah, he didn't want you to buy the boat if you want to make it a yacht." And he said, "Well, in that case, I want to do it. I want him to do it, And then I said, "Well, I won't do it because I just work with kids." But then eventually I changed my mind and I did it. And then he kept it for 28 years. We stayed friends. And then he eventually sold it to the King of Morocco, who still has it. And it's called El Bourgatz. And it's been, renovated as well in the south of France. But it lives in Casablanca in the Navy Yard, quite often.
Well, it's part of the Moroccan Navy.
It's part of the Moroccan Navy, in a sense.
And I thought you had a chance to go to sail and take it to Caribbean or something.
I did, but that was when it was still owned by us, I didn't sail it with sailors.
So there's another Aquarius you mentioned.
Oh yeah, because, when I was sailing my boat in Cape Town, I called him up and I said, I want to, come drink some of your wine, because he owns about 4 of the major vineyards there in Stellenbosch. And he said, "No, you have to come and help me find another boat. I sold the boat, stupidest thing I ever did." And then
Best day work,
yeah,
right?
so I helped him find a classic Perini, and that was like $12.5 million. And that boat.
How much did it cost to rebuild the Aquarius?
Yeah,
You can't even buy a date for what
$4.5
it
million at the time, but it would have been like $10 million to build a boat at the time. Now it would be like $50 million to build a boat again today.
Wow. I don't know how you did it.
It's like the rule of thumb is €1 million per meter. In yachting.
How much of the steel hull survives from our day? I'm guessing not a lot.
No.
The
We
hull
took
to the rig.
entire hull off, and except for a little section that we had replayed ourselves. And then we cut the frames to accommodate new steel plates, and so all new steel, and everything was redone. And it was just, there was nothing in there.
Well,
Nothing.
I was at the top of
Just
the mast. when they
Just
were
rings.
cutting the base of the
Take all
mast.
the.
And
Hit the pin out of that shackle and hold on for dear life. I had my legs wrapped around that.
I was cutting it with the torch.
Boy, and the mast was going like this, and Sid's there cutting with a cutting torch.
No, I
Hold on,
was-
Sammy, hold on.
Oh, Sid's cutting and then I cut it. Well,
Yep. And
By
they
the way,
had
I
the crane
just-
wrapped around, so the mast wasn't going anywhere except swinging like this. Okay, hold on, Sammy, we're gonna bring you down nice and easy.
And then
I got-
we cut the pilot, Chris Rager, we cut the whole pilot house into sections that we could lift
Yeah.
off the boat.
Right.
And we asked
Corky,
for the crane to
remember Corky?
get
Bring the crane.
to get it off the boat. There's this big German guy, he's called the thick guy, Dicker, and he said he couldn't have a crane today, so we had all of us out there, you know, and there was
Well, we
like
had to
10
wait
of
till high
us
tide,
trying
right?
to throw this massive piece of the deck house up on, in the dumpster. And this guy comes up there, big old German, and he looks at us working.
Ruining perfectly good wood.
Crane, you know?
Oh, they say
They
they
love
would
it.
sit there
They
for
couldn't
days
believe
taking
we did it.
screws and nails out of this wood. This is wood holds. You cannot throw this away. You are wasting valuable resources. And
So,
then we
yes.
actually took the teak deck off. We called it the tiger teak because it was lag bolted through the bottom. Everybody knows what the TeQuest looks like from underneath. And some of the boards came easy and some of them didn't want to let go. And
So
that wood actually got sold to TeVega, right?
Yeah.
And remilled and
They
redone.
did their deck with it, yeah.
Put it in a container, we had to tie the containers down because sometimes we'd have really high tides there in Germany. They were worried about the whole container of beautiful teak wood floating away.
I think you said that when you rebuilt it, they let you take all these fittings and keep them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, anything. So all the port lights went back and I polished some up for the former owners, Robles. And we presented that when Walter Cronkite was on board the boat, going up the river there for the Olympics in South Carolina. I guess it was off Skidaway Island. And that's where the boat had originally.
The boat actually went up to Skidaway.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
I've been in there, how the hell did you get that thing? They got 12 foot for
Yeah,
gravity.
There was a commemorative T-shirt made of that event when we returned to Skidway Island because the
The head of the
Romans
Olympic
donated.
Committee was on board with Walter Cronkite and that's when I gave him the port lights.
And so I got curious, being Scorpio guys,
We're both there.
Yeah. What about all that concrete that was in the bottom of TeVega? TeQuest, whatever happened? Did they take it out?
I can tell you about that. Sid and I took care of that. That was part of the contract that Jim saved some money on. He had us, cheap labor. And we were all doing fine, so we decided to take a little flight through. Sid and I would be loading lead at night and pouring concrete because we had to be done when they started at 6 or 6:30 in the morning. Of course, the workers all like this, and we got a lot of free labor out of them. And the yard manager was noticing that his crane was not logging hours that were being used, and we were pulling things off that boat every high tide. And he used to come down and they used to take us in these little shops where they stowed everything for the boat when they took it apart. And the guys would say, "Come in here, boys. What? You'll have to have a little drink with us." We go in there and they would have some kind of corn with alcohol and Fanta orange soda. "Here, drink this and we'll keep you warm in the winter."
So the long story, so the short story is you report all that concrete back in the keel?
We put lead in and then concrete.
So it had a better center, deeper center.
Well, it was it had to be a lead because those new engines were much lighter than the old Enterprise, right?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, the boat was re-engineered probably by,
So they did a beautiful job.
and.
Crazy transmission.
What happened to the
single
Enterprise?
shafts.
The Enterprise, it just,
The engine.
They jumped
What
on
did they do
The
that?
Ultima Zone that we had hooked up to the Volvos, remember?
yeah.
That was a museum.
Yeah, I know.
I remember on the old
1 foot bore, right?
The old Enterprise
Yeah.
engine.
The
Let's go check the
engine
oil.
rods were 6 feet and the, it
Remember on
was
the
one,
shafts?
12 inches on each
Yeah,
piston.
I think we said it about recycling and the other stuff.
Do you think it was just scrapped or melted down in that engine?
John, when we went up for our 1-year warranty, 1-year warranty when the shafts broke, right?
Oh, yeah.
They were there, we sailed in, right?
Yeah.
We're still good.
Yeah, yeah, it was running. Good old engine, which will go forever.
By the way, there's an engine like that at a museum in Okeechobee, at a whole pump house museum, there's an engine just like the Enterprise.
There was, I haven't seen it in about 20 years, but there was one outside of Fairhope, Alabama in the field
on
Yes,
Enterprise.
very much.
Can you tell us about that story? Because when I think back on it, it seemed like it was quite dangerous. When we got to Loch Trinity, it did blow up pretty bad.
It was very dangerous, and we knew the storm was coming, and I knew the storm was coming, and that's why we were trying to get there quickly. And so I was ready to sit.
We were halfway across the Bay of Biscay, so we were
halfway
pretty
across the
close
Bay of
situation,
Biscay, and somebody opened the wrong valve on the Enterprise. And there's a day tank, right? And the day tank, valve would constantly feeding the engine. But the valve there was also like water settles in the fuel, and so there was a little sump. And somebody opened that sump with somehow water in the fuel supply system. So water went straight into the injectors. And so each of the 6 pumps, which were about this big, had an injector sleeve in there which was about this big, and that had the sleeve in there which normally will slide in and out with your little finger. But when you put water in there, the tolerance was so tight with no oil that they totally jammed up. So there was no way that was going to run. And I didn't know what was wrong with the engine, but I knew it wasn't running, and nobody could even make it turn over because it was jammed. So I was the only one who knew how to fix it, and I didn't even know what was wrong with it. So it got picked up by you guys, and brought across.
You came over in a
Middle of the
launch,
night.
climbed aboard.
Yeah, I climbed the board, and then it took me like 4 hours to take something like all 6 of those apart, take the thing, and I had to hammer them open, and hammer the sleeves out, and then get the water out, and then purge all the lines, re-oil them, put them together, making sure they were nice and loose, put the whole thing back together, and went back to the boat, and we just took off from there, and we made it in time, because it was that bay is like notoriously one of the worst places ever.
Always
Bay.
We were a long way from the shore with that.
We were in the middle.
We were in the middle. We
Yeah.
were like 100 miles,
Just south of the middle.
100 miles from land.
Yeah, and TeVega, in the same time when it stopped, it backed down on its rudder, and broke, the rudder. I think we had a steer with the emergency steer. Maybe that was a different time.
That was a different time. I was there.
That wasn't.
In the whole
Coming out of
history of the
Adelaide.
school was the most serious casualty, probably with the TeQuest
Yeah,
and
but
the
I still
transpired, I think serious
I still remember.
because
I still remember.
we almost lost the whole thing that we had one of the
Yeah, what happened was the valves, the cable that was down there.
shackle was shackled.
I think the cable actually broke.
I heard a 20-ton chain, I think, and a 25-ton shackle. And the shackle broke.
I thought it was the cable that broke, but you think the chain broke?
It's the shackle that held it to the hull had worn through the corrosion.
Yeah, it was a shackle that went up.
Okay, well, whatever happened, and then the basket just went up in the air,
It was scary.
And
By the time we took the sails down and we were in the troughs for a
That
while,
wasn't scary, though.
I was in the radio room and we did this 55-degree roll at one point. And then, go any further down, we're not coming back.
No, you couldn't come back. The only boat how many people saw White Squall?
Oh.
Okay, White Squall was a boat run by Christopher Sheldon called the Albatross. And that was like Irving Johnson because that captain, bought that boat from a guy that was named Ernest Gahn. He was a famous pilot and
And a writer too, right? Yeah, he was a famous writer too.
He wrote Thetis the Hunter, and he was a famous writer, and he wrote a lot of books, but he wanted to write one about the sea, and he was very inspired by Irving. So he went and bought this boat called the Albatross, which was a Dutch pilot schooner. It was designed to take pilots off the port of Rotterdam and drop them. So it was basically a fairly shallow draft because it's shallow water there. It wasn't designed for the open sea, but then when the writer, Ernest Gahn, bought it, he wanted to look like Irving's boat, so he put up more masts and yard arms and all kinds of stuff so he could sail and ride a boat.
No extra keels, huh?
But nobody did an inclination test on the boat, and it wasn't designed to have all that weight up there. So when Chris Sheldon bought the boat from him in San Francisco after he'd done a Pacific trip, he didn't do an inclination test either. If that boat had a critical angle, if it did go more than 45 degrees, it was not coming back. Now, TeVega, you could have put the mast underwater and let it go.
Big deal.
It's coming back. And teQuest and Aquarius, they also had, you know, that. My boats right now, it's 110 degrees. So you can pull the mast underwater 25 degrees and it's still coming back. You know. So, you know, America's Cup boats, you used to have to put them in upside down and they would come back. You know, but that boat was not. And so Chris Sheldon lost his wife, his baby, the cook, and one of the kids in the 60s off the Florida Everglades because he got caught in a storm and they had the hatches open and the boat blew down and it just never came back. In the movie it went around the whole time, but you know, actually it just turned turtle and that was that. And the kids came out the dumbwaiter, you know, going down the dumbwaiter and climbing out the boat. But no, we were quite safe in that way. So 45 degrees, 50 degrees.
It was 55. I was watching. In the deck house, you can see the mast moving several inches on Quest inside the ring. This is not good.
Yeah. No, we were okay.
What's your job, Taylor? Are you a staff?
We'll get back to Bermuda anyway.
I was more scared when the gaff broke off and I had to sail off.
You're talking about experiences. One time I was in the injuries. I was checking the water level. Remember, we had to lay down, you know, and try to check it. And we were sailing at night. It was like late night, I don't know, about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I remember someone grabbed me, you know, and put me in their back like a potato sack. You know, pop! And he said, "What's going on?" And I didn't even talk to me. I said, "Oh." I started running, climb out, and we went all the way to the dock. And everybody was information, you know, we have an account. You call for a emergency, you know, like
yeah.
We were always training.
Yeah, that was a training.
It was a training. So I called one. I guess
1, 2.
number 50 came over. And where's number 50? This way. Where number is it? So
I didn't
I
know.
in the engine room. I was the only one.
You had to know your number and the number on both sides of you, right? So we still do that today.
Here's number 50.
Hey, you still, you don't do the December 7th fire drill, do you?
With the smoke bombs and everything.
Yeah. Is that George's thing or your thing?
That's George's thing.
Remember the smoke bombs?
Smoke bombs and
fire
station.
station.
I still wake up when it's warm.
Yeah.
In retrospect, today, would you do more like man-over drills and firefighting drills that we actually did at the time?
All the
Seemed to me
time.
we didn't do enough of that.
You didn't do enough of it, and there was laxity on my side as well. We actually did not, because you just get, I don't know, without the controls. We are inspected every year, for example, in and out of the water, where all of our stuff is verified by Bureau Veritas, they're on board, and that keeps us honest, you know? And it's a very good system and a good thing. So we just finished another inspection in Antigua, and TeVega is, you know, has been extended just because we can't get the inspector in to pull out. But basically, you know, every year there's a thorough control of all the safety equipment. But, you know, even in those days, I wasn't checking thoroughly enough, and you know, but we didn't even have things like EPIRS and whatever else back in those days.
We had that weather fax that was about the size of the refrigerator.
Yeah, and I sat there looking at that thing like a hawk. You know.
It was so huge. What year was that thing from? World War II or something? It was
No,
so
that's
big.
about 74.
Really?
Yeah, that was the state of the art.
It was huge. I mean, we don't have that sound, right?
Got some water.
Wiggle that line.
Yeah.
If I need 6. And what kind of box was it?
So I guess your job got a lot easier when GPS finally came out.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Sexy used to Katie?
I still teach celestial on boats when I go out. Yeah. And a lot of kids want to take it. And then they quickly fall away, you know, when they realize it's not just like looking at stars.
There's a lot of math.
But I end up with, you know, out of a crew of 24, maybe 6 will go through the whole thing. It's good. I mean, you can still do it, you know, it's a pretty good thing.
Well, your GPS can die, your batteries can go,
Yeah.
you can lose your electronics. It's good to have the backups.
In theory you can, but, you know, every Apple phone has got it.
Yeah.
You know.
still, at some point, you're out of batteries or something's happened. It's good to have a backup. Just
People don't realize that your Apple phone will tell you your GPS position anywhere in the world. And when you're out at sea, it also is still getting, you know, Greenwich time off the satellites. It's still getting your position that way, and you can run all of the apps of the stars, you know, like Sky Guide and other things like that, you know, at sea. You know, it's an app that works off the satellites. Very cool stuff.
So you've built 2 schooners now, right? Both the same design?
3.
Oh, you got
Two
3
of
of
the
them?
same design. Yeah. And one's,
So you got 3
one's
now?
Ocean Star. It's an older world.
Got any plans for any more? or-
I'd like to, but not. I mean, we just finished the other boat, right?
So then they're all built in that 1 yard in Thailand,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. And that's where we're going back. That's where, you know, this Christmas, that boat will go in. It'll go in 6 months, and we'll spend $1 million making it brand new again. So that'll happen starting in January. Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about the transformation of the boatyard in Thailand from when you first went there to what it is now? Because I'm guessing you taught them a lot of stuff.
They never built sailboats before. They built a lot of fast military craft, you know, and customs boats and military boats and gunboats and all that kind of stuff, but they never built sailboats. They didn't realize how much work it was. But we just had them build the hull, and we brought in our own people and did, you know, a lot of the subcontracting ourselves. We did it on this boat too. And but so we bought all the equipment from the United States. And then, yeah, they have become a listed yard and are, you know, well recognized by the Navy. But right now, the Thai Navy bought 2 submarines from China and spent all their money that way. So the yard's struggling for business, particularly in COVID right now. But they got us coming back anyway. So we'll go back.
So what you taught them about building yachts, they haven't been able to capitalize on with new clients? Is that
They
one way of looking
did
at it?
have the richest guy in Thailand bring in a boat that I arranged through his captain to come there. And so they've got a pretty good reputation from doing that. But, you know, there's Thai people and Asian people in general, they just want some fantastic plastic that they can sit on and, you know, put their thumbs in their collars, you know, because they're not boating people. They don't like to be in the sun. They don't like to take their shirt off or, you know, or get any kind of suntan. You go around Thailand, every convenience store is selling skin whiteners because they would never think of going and laying out in the sun. That would be like amazing, you know. So they're not putting people as in general, but they do want to be westernized a little bit by, you know, pretending that they're voting people when they don't really care. That's but it's also China, Vietnam, and Malaysia. Singapore's got more yachts than anything else, but that's just because they're pretty westernized.
Yeah.
Was the problem with the gap, was that the last year?
When it broke?
Yeah.
No, I think it was about 78. I think it was summertime, wasn't it?
I think so.
I think it was a summer trip.
Yeah, I was there 78, 79. It didn't happen in the school year.
No, it didn't happen in school. It happened over a summer trip.
I was on day of last
I bet it happened before 78.
This is much colors
Yeah,
for you.
practically.
Yeah, we had to break on the outside of the Norway ones, but at that saddle fitting and charging of the rigging, that was on a sail from Monaco down to Palma, and it was hairy, but scary. And I'm pretty sure it was a summer trip. Another summer trip.
Fore gap or main gap?
The main gap.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I think it was a couple of times, wasn't it?
And yeah, when it was flying around, I had to climb out and cut the sail off and unshackle it, and I was about to fall off all the time. So,
As designed, was she required to have someone to sit in the saddle so it didn't dig in, or was that just some kind of...
it's just something we did.
Absolutely. Just getting from the gap up to the, getting from the saddle up to the spreader arm was like a 4-foot reach. It was not
That was
fun.
a good ride.
No harness for that job either.
You never forget when you do that either.
By the way,
We
that's
had to leave Dover Harbor that one time because they were going to work on the locks. They made us leave at like a force 8. And that was like one of the few times I rode the saddle up. And I was so regretting I did that because as we got to the mouth of Dover, we were doing like I mean, the mast was going
It
like
was
50
insane
feet side to
rough
side,
that
yeah.
day. That day was madness.
It was not fun.
Like I said, you had to get the sail up before we went through the breakwater, because I'd already walked out and looked at the breakwater, the sea was like 9, 10 feet. And it was standing there, it wasn't moving.
Yeah.
You know, because the current was against that sea.
That was some of
And
the
it was
roughest weather we
blowing
saw.
force 9 from this direction, and we had to go that direction. So as soon as we got through there, we took a roll, and somebody screamed bloody murder.
Yeah.
And I was petrified, and I ran forward, and they were just afraid of, they were just petrified, because they were petrified, holding on to the, it was one of the girls.
It was a girl came out.
Yeah,
some blue water back in the
Enough in the
deck
deck
house
house
on
to
that
scream
minute.
because you saw the water. We were like,
yeah, I know, it's
Yeah.
like, nothing really went wrong.
No.
You know, and then we bared off, and that was the time we went to Samoa with hail on the deck. You know, you couldn't walk on the deck, it was like marbles. And we had 3 inches of ice on the mast by the time we arrived, 24 hours later. And then we got a rents down at night, which is really dangerous. We went up to the rocks, and then we went through the locks, you know, at the rents at night. And then we went in, and then teQuest came in, but she was coming in a little bit slow. And the bowsprit took off the chain link fence, you know, on the way into the lock, that she made it into the lock.
Did we crack a cap rail too?
And probably a little damage.
And then I remember everybody came down with a bad cold after that, except for like 5 people, and I was one of them.
I just remember when we were coming in, it was hard to start with, you had ski goggles on, because you couldn't see a thing.
Yeah.
It was, I mean,
It
that
was
was.
very, very
It was a
scary.
wall.
The one time you could see things was when George docked up in Elsinore, northern part of Denmark.
Yeah.
There was a place we went into
Castle,
Elsinore.
beautiful castle.
Beautiful castle there,
Yeah.
but it's a narrow entrance, there's a lot of current going across, you had crab going in, and then you had to straighten out. Well, George was crabbing coming in, and, but when he was straightening out, teQuest didn't respond quite as fast as TeVega does anyway, and George, I don't know, it didn't turn very fast. And there was a ferry boat sitting there, and people were sitting there eating, and their eyes were just... and they got up and ran away from the table. I didn't see it because I was already in, but that's what everybody on the bow said. Everybody ran away from their tables, and the boat just barely got it didn't touch, you know.
Wasn't that where, I thought George told us a story that nobody was on the engine or something one of those years and they ran away? That's where teQuest ran up on the steel wall.
I think, I don't know about teQuest. I know we backed into the wall once because Earl Ziegler.
It was, I remember the telegraph, because if you push it forward, it was reversed. You push it aft, it was forward, and he was no sleep. And I was in the dinghy to catch the boat, and I'm sitting there, and it's coming, he goes, full, it just got faster and faster, and rode, like France, I think, rode up, the fantail rode up on the concrete.
Yeah, we had the anchor down, and we were backing in slow, and then Earl went down in the engine room. That's true, it was 2 o'clock in the morning or something. But like I said, like when you would ring the telegraph on deck, down in the engine room, the little arrow, it did say that's forward and that's reverse. But reverse, the arrow would point forward, you know? And all the time.
And the throttle was the other one.
You know, he'd been doing it for ages, you know? But then I was ringing, like, this boat is not slowing down, so I rung stop. And then half ahead, you know? Half reverse, you know? And we're still backing up into the key. And I said, uh-oh. Ring, 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 ring. And wake up, whatever's happening there, full ahead, and full reverse, you know? And so the boat transom was higher than the key, fortunately. And so it just went back and then back down again, but it leaved a little scar, you know? Just adventures. What else, PK?
I don't know.
Okay.
Told quite a few stories. Anybody have any quick questions?
I don't think you guys knew when we were goofing around in Copenhagen, and we were playing along the docks, and I fell between the ships. Right between the ships. Right
crushed by the ships. And Tom Brenniger reaches down and pulls me out of the water by my hair, pulls my whole body out of the water.
Is that what happened?
Explains it.
And I whipped him against
I don't know if anybody told you. I came within seconds of being violently killed right in Copenhagen, probably a couple times, but I don't know if anybody ever told you guys that. I'm
sure I would not have wanted to know.
I don't think they got back to you.
Spooky stuff. But like I said, we were really lucky.
Yeah.
You know, in the end of the day, all the adventures that happened over all those years, it was like we were being watched over or something. Because, you know, I put it in favor of a more responsible lifestyle, but the reality was, good thing we did, you know, because also things were changing. It was obvious even then because, you know, the rules and regulations were coming tighter. In the beginning, school ships, it really was one hand for yourself and anybody could do it. You know, and you didn't even need a license to do what we were doing, you know, back in the beginning. But it was clear that the time was limited for doing it on those boats. The new boats that we have, we took the hull of teQuest, we went to the lead designers, Parker and Stevens. We made the boat exactly the same hull as the Aquarius, but 1 centimeter less than the load waterline rule for 24 meters, which allows us to operate outside of SOLAS rules as a small commercial vessel. So we're the largest vessel built to the 24-meter load waterline rule, or so-called small commercial vessel worldwide standard for the Blue Book, as it's called. And so that's how we operate today. We could not any longer today take those 2 boats and go to sea. It just would not be allowed, not commercial.
You think you got a kid up in the bow by himself in the middle of the dark in the Baltic alone at 2 o'clock in the morning with the waves, and it just took one little something for someone to disappear, and you would have never known. Nobody would have ever known.
That is true.
Or climbing a rig 120 feet.
There was
moving
always a
around.
line being dragged by the boat with somebody's pants tied to it.
Grab on, climb back on board.
Somebody was trying to do their laundry.
We're told we're fishing.
Yeah, our total fishing.
Shake it off, it's only a scratch.
Did you ever have a man on board?
No, I was saying the only man overboard we ever had was in our summer program, where somebody was taking a picture and kept walking backwards. Went right off the rock. But no, we never did.
Lucky, I remember going through the
We
North Sea
drilled
in
from
some
man
rough water
overboard.
and boat got knocked down from a wave that came over the bow.
Yeah, there's plenty of times something could have happened.
Yeah.
Like you said, we're lucky.
We had a lot of close calls.
But you know, when you have to be lucky, you are sometimes. And it's almost like when you have to hold on, you do.
The closest call I can remember was Todd. Where's Todd? Yeah, dude. In Nice. Why did we anchor in that place where it was so rocky? We sent a diver down to try and recover the anchor.
Yeah.
And he put a cable. Well, George, I don't think you were there. I think George had this diver put the cable on the anchor. And when we were winching it up, the cable snapped and it whipped and hit Todd in the face.
Yeah.
I was standing right next to him. It's the scariest damn thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. That was on TeQuest.
I don't think you were there.
Boats anchor there all the time.
Yeah.
Bill Frosh.
Yeah, exactly there, yeah.
But when the wind starts blowing from the Mistral, it hooks around that point, and then it comes into Villefranche. I've been in Villefranche on our other new boats, and I've gone down to work on the shaft seal. You know, on a perfectly beautiful day, and I'm working on the shaft seal, and I have the whole thing pulling apart in the waters, coming in, and we're pumping the bilge while we're tightening up the shaft seal. And then the boat just starts jumping around. The swell comes in there like really fast, and the only way to do is get out of that port and get around the corner to St. Anne on the other side of Beaulieu. But nevertheless, that was that is still commonly anchored in all the time. Yachts anchor there all the time. It's crowded. You can hardly anchor there because of the yachts.
Despite losing our anchor that day,
Yeah.
I was always proud of the fact that we had
2 ski boats out. All of the sunfish were in the water. The floating abstraction, of course, was in the water with somebody doing something. Literally everything was scattered all over that bay. And when deck stations rang and they said, tighten it up, we got everything onto the boat in no time. I could not believe how quickly we started raising anchor. I was really proud of that.
I don't remember that.
It was-
I remember being hit by lightning there once.
We got hit by lightning up Bimini before we went up to tall ships. And then we broke the triax, remember that?
Yeah.
By the way, after that horrible tsunami in Thailand, I looked up tsunamis, and that tsunami that we were in Nice was listed as one of the known tsunamis that's been reported.
That actually wouldn't be technically a tsunami because it was actually a shelf, an underwater shelf that fell down. From the
It's on
airport.
the official tsunami book on Wikipedia.
Yeah, well, I mean, I believe that they called it somewhat, you know. But I mean, it wasn't like a underwater earthquake, it was from the runoff.
For the rock, the cables, ropes.
Pulled the old TeQuest out of the water, now we were down in the village cleaning, and there was a piece of plywood, marine text, to the steel hull. We pulled off the plywood, the hole in the steel was about that big. The plywood was painted, probably a 3/4 inch piece of plywood stuck on with marine text.
Really?
Yeah. And you said, oh, that guy was gonna replace the whole bottom. Sitting on down there.
I remember.
And I said, Tim, what's that square block down there? I don't know, let's find out, Timmy. He got a chisel and he hit the piece of wood off. And the steel was like, and it was painted.
I
The plywood was actually
since
painted.
we were there.
That had to be left up forever. I mean, it was way in.
Well, didn't the boat sit there for a while for sale in Copenhagen?
No, but yeah, but that wouldn't have been in that time. That would have been before we bought the boat.
It was an incredible area.
Really?
It was
Yeah.
like imagine
Well,
that
it was
area.
pretty big,
Yeah.
Tom was blind from the outside.
You should tell the story about how TeQuest got
I showed some people, but it sat in the southern Bahamas, where it sat in Turks and Caicos for 7 years, you know, just rusting away with a guy named John Black who bought it for treasure hunting. And he had a bad back and he needed an operation. And he realized he was never going to make it with the treasure hunting, so he sold the boat and for $20,000 is what we paid for it. And then we took it up to the shipyard in Fort Lauderdale, put enough stuff and money and time and replating into it to make it seaworthy enough to get across the Atlantic. I wasn't involved in it.
How did you guys know it was a sailboat? Because it looked nothing like a sailboat at the time. It looked like a junky tramp
It
steamer.
was because we had all the plans from the Roeblings who built the Brooklyn Bridge, and it was the Roebling yacht, the Black Douglas, a famous boat, you know. And so it was well known and had been on, and it was used by the Fish and Wildlife Service. Even TeVega was used, you know, during the war as a offshore vessel in San Francisco on submarine patrol. Yeah, submarine. In TeVega, they took the topmast down, but they
were on the
later
list,
on,
they didn't
but
respond.
they took the whole mast out of teQuest and threw it away.
In case you're not aware, there's a guy in Canada, a professor who did a bunch of research. He was on during the Stanford years before Flint School. And Jim and myself and Will all helped him write this book, and you can download it free as a PDF. Or I have a copy of it as a PDF.
TeVega and repeated it.
All I did was
It's still, it's.
He did, yeah, Will did the cover of this book by writing design
TeVega has
cover.
to be
She did.
TK. I think they maybe do another print.
Now
I think I've seen it available
There's
online.
another boat just.
Amazon has
outside.
it.
Yeah.
I don't know where he spent $60, $70 million for this boat. Famous thing. And it's big.
We hold it for a while.
Yeah, they'll hold the record for a while.
But there's some really interesting history about TeVega here, you know, Nazi owned it. One time. Did he get got confiscated at Pearl Harbor? He had a contract to do Pearl Harbor stuff.
Yeah, he had he was the defense contractor that built the defenses for Pearl Harbor, but he also had a lot of contacts in Japan, and there were secret telex going back to his yellow friends. And basically, they think he might have betrayed the country, but he also used TeVega to transport, it was dry in all of Hawaii, but also on the military base. So he loaded up the whole boat with scotch and sailed it from Los Angeles out there and took it into the Navy base, and that's where they distributed the scotch to officers. You know, it's they're the Navy, but they think that he may have betrayed the defenses to the Japanese.
And one other thing, if you're not familiar with it, TeVega is very famous in the environmental world because when Stanford had it, it sailed across the Pacific, and it took all kinds of measurements on the biodiversity of the Pacific Ocean, and it was the first ship apparently to do a lot of that. And it's been used as a benchmark for the degradation of the ocean. It's all the work that was done on TeVega.
Yeah, TeVega did a lot of that. In between other adventures, like burning out our engine room of Madagascar during that trip, and having to struggle into Cape Town for days. There's a lot of adventures on that boat.
Yeah, so anyway, it used to be free as a PDF online somewhere. Someone said it's on Amazon now.
$98.
Well, if you want to
Paperback.
have them make you one, yeah. Which that's a one-off.
So we could probably be here all night, but the good thing is I've made it a hobby, especially since George and Betty started giving me all this stuff. And Jim's been gracious enough to let me scan and digitize a lot of his stuff. And I've been putting it all online, so you can spend hours on my website, there's pictures of all this stuff. Matter of fact, tonight I just got the pictures from teQuest being pulled apart, to be converted into Aquarius, and I find it fascinating because you can see the bones of teQuest and what teQuest looks like without the animal.
I have all negatives, but it's a file about this big. It's all negative. So I'm going to give that to PK, which I brought today, and he's going to do another. That covers the whole span of the years, and so he'll probably put that stuff online later on.
Thank you.
Thanks to PK for doing all that. That's great.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work, but I just do a little bit every once in a while. I get the moves, it's not so bad.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thanks to everybody that made this fun.
The helm over here and the bollard and the tackle, those all came from TeVega?
That was from TeVega. Actually, Irving kept his steering wheel off the Yankees, so I figured I could get away with it. And I bought a new steering wheel in Copenhagen that was pretty similar. And then brought this one back, and it needs to be polished, so it's
We're aggressive.
You got a cloth and some brasso?
I did I did it for a joke. That's the real one.
This is brass, follow this from teQuest.
No, that's from TeVega. It was one behind the workbench that nobody ever used, so I took it off the deck at one point, and so we still have, I have two of them actually. And the block is the main sheet block from TeVega because we replaced.
I don't remember being that big, and I was little back then.
Yeah. That's aluminum detail.
Oh, hardwood.
Yeah. But the new ones on the Aquarius, they're like excellent stuff. Okay.
So the bollards from teQuest, Randy Blanchard, if you remember him, I think it's Randy Richards, purchased them from Betty's daughter, I think, about a couple years ago. So he's got those.
Last call. Anybody?
Last call, people. Grab some alcohol.
Jim, thank you for an incredibly unique experience.
Thank you guys. It's a team, we all made it. We just all did our part. Yeah, this was to get the airline. I wonder if
That's a picture of one of our boats up here, I'm pretty sure it is.
Still on my seat back.
What?
Okay, so that was the parent?
The parent owner.
And then you guys wrote my nickname Tono instead of Anthony, so I'm